Space stocks are getting lots of attention, but can they deliver out of this world returns? In this video, we'll tell you about 10 stocks tied to the space economy with perspective from an expert investor. And we'll tell you about a group of private space companies that are expected to go public on the stock market soon. So let's get to it. This is Ticker Take.
John, the space economy is booming and people are trying to figure out how to cash in. I'm wearing my space-inspired ensemble for the occasion.
Hey, I like the look. To get a look at the space economy, we spoke to an expert, Chad Anderson. Chad's been a successful early-stage investor in space businesses through Space Capital. He is also the author of the book, The Space Economy. And we asked him the question, can people make money through investing in space?
So, yes, absolutely. And people already have. So, a lot of people, when they think about space, they think about the Apollo moon landings and the International Space Station and sort of these grand human achievements. But they don't think about the entrepreneurs that are transforming every major industry here on Earth. But that is the opportunity that we're focused on at Space Capital. GPS really underpins the space economy and is a great example of a space technology that has become ubiquitous in our everyday lives. It has delivered trillions of dollars in economic value, some of the largest investor returns that the world's ever seen.
With that said, Chad walked us through 10 stocks tied to the space economy. But first, this is not financial advice.
In alphabetical order, stock number 1, Alphabet.
Well, Google's parent company is generally a well-liked stock on Wall Street, but we don't normally think of this as a space play. Here's Chad.
Yeah, I mean, so space isn't limited to just firms that are building rockets or orbital platforms, right? I mean, Google has played a key role in space technology, permeating out and being useful tools in all of our lives. So Google Maps is a great example. 2005, they brought us Google Maps, which everyone uses in basically every aspect of their life, whether you're going, out to dinner or trying to find your way around. They have bought satellite companies in the past, including ones that partners here at Space Capital have sold to Google and have made money for investors that way. They're now really focused on this intersection of geospatial intelligence and artificial intelligence, big data sets using AI to make sense of all that. And in this earlier this year, they posted $8 billion in on their P&L from an investment that they made in 2015 into SpaceX. So they're making money from space investments as well.
Stock number 2, Amazon.
Well, like Alphabet, Amazon is a very well-liked stock on Wall Street, and we know Jeff Bezos, the Amazon founder, is busy with his space business, Blue Origin. As for the Amazon connection to space, here's Chad.
The Blue Origin is Jeff Bezos's play in space, and where he's doing a lot of his, rockets and space stations, and really going after that vision that he's had since he was young. Amazon is focused, with their feet firmly here on the ground, focused on the opportunity here on Earth. And Amazon's interest in space is connectivity, right? So their e-commerce business and all the other businesses that Amazon has their hands in, whether it be cloud and AWS, connectivity, increased connectivity by bringing the other 3 billion people on the planet who aren't connected, connecting them to the internet. They now increases their consumer customer base, right? So Amazon is building this constellation of Kuiper satellites to compete with SpaceX's Starlink and really tap into that growing market for consumer and cloud.
Stock number 3, Eutelstat.
This is a French-listed stock, and it's had a notable move already, so a lot of analysts are on the fence. Let's get some more perspective.
Eutelstat has not been a particularly interesting business until recently it's hit the headlines, right? So with the tariff war that's going on, Europe is now looking for sovereign solutions. They have the rearm plan with 800 billion euros being made available to increase sovereignty and defense. A big piece of that is space and satellite applications. Eutelsat is a satellite communications company. It is based in Paris and traded on the London Stock Exchange. This company was teetering on the edge and was in pretty dire straits even just half a year ago, right? But again, with this tariff situation, there's now a lot of investment. French President Macron has said that they're putting $1.6 billion into the company. That's really given it a lot more life in this situation we're in today.
Stock number 4, Intuitive Machines.
Well, coming into this year, we had seen a lot of excitement with this stock before a big decline. It is still liked by a majority of analysts. Let's get more perspective from Chad now.
Intuitive Machines is an interesting one because this is what in an area that we call emerging industries within the space economy, right? So these are new markets. Intuitive Machines is building landers to ride on a SpaceX or another launch vehicle to go to the lunar surface, land, and deliver cargo for NASA or for exploration or science. This is an interesting one. They were one of NASA's top picks. They had 2 missions, both of which they successfully landed on the moon, but then tipped over. So partially successful in the end. Some moderately happy customers who are now on the moon, but maybe couldn't fulfill their entire mission. So it's calling into question, so this stock is kind of all over the place. At the same time, we've got new companies that are coming online and giving it a bit of a run for its money. So it's not the only lunar play out there. There is a company in Japan, ICEYE, traded on the Japanese stock exchange. There is Firefly Aerospace is the first company to really successfully touch down on the lunar surface last year, and they have just filed to go public. So we're going to see that maybe in Q3.
Stock number 5, John Deere.
Well, this is not a stock that is overwhelmingly recommended on Wall Street right now, but more importantly, how is John Deere a space company? Let's get more context from Chad.
And they're not a space company because they're building anything that's on orbit, but they are embedding satellite navigation, communications, and data services deeply into its products, right? So it relies on space technology for revenue and capability. They are an early mover in precision agriculture. That is underpinned by positioning, navigation, and timing, GPS, which provides a great initial location, but then for precision agriculture, you need to get much, much more precise. So they have then developed correction services to make that positioning even more precise. And so that is powering their autonomous tractors and their autonomy solutions. So this is a really interesting name from that perspective. And then also they've recently did a deal with Starlink. So now all of their tractors and heavy equipment are connected through satellite connectivity.
Stock number 6, Planet Labs.
Well, Planet Labs can be a choppy stock, although it's had a good year, and generally it's a well-liked stock on Wall Street. Let's get some more context on Planet Labs.
So Planet Labs is one of the originals, right? Where, again, we've been operating in space for decades, but it's really only become a category for investors recently on the heels of SpaceX. So SpaceX removed the barriers to entry and enabled new entrants to come in for the first time. And Planet Labs was one of those first movers. They used SpaceX's access to orbit. They launched a bunch of small satellites. They had the world's largest constellation of satellites at the time. So they've got this really interesting data set that is really timely and relevant from that perspective. Like they had the first images of the Earth on a daily basis back in 2017, and they've continued to grow since then. So they continue to bring new sensors online, new data sets. They have a lot of government customers here in the US, and the Europeans, as they look for solutions, have actually turned to Planet Labs, and they've gotten some significant contracts from Germany and other European countries as well.
Stock number 7, Rocket Lab.
Well, we get a lot of inquiries about Rocket Lab, which has had a rocket ship-like ride, and it is a well-liked stock, although it has pushed through most of the average 12-month target prices on Wall Street. Chat again.
Rocket Lab is a really interesting one. It's another space capital family company. We've invested in the company in the past. This is a direct competitor to SpaceX. So they have a launch vehicle, which gives them a lot of strategic capability. They have a new, larger launch vehicle that's going to compete more directly with SpaceX in the future. They do a lot of really interesting, difficult engineering missions. They have a mission to the moon. They have a spacecraft that's going to Venus. They're doing a lot of really interesting things. They're building spacecraft, and they've built out this spacecraft services business where it's generating a lot of their revenue. And there's even talk that they're going to build out a Starlink competitor on the satellite communications side. So if you start to think about, is Rocket Lab overpriced at 25 billion or whatever it is today? I mean, you compare that to SpaceX and you start to think, if they eat into a little bit more of that market share and SpaceX is at 400 billion, how high could this thing go?
Stock number 8, SCS.
Well, this is another European play that's had a good move, which has left a lot of the analysts on the sideline. Let's get the breakdown on this one.
So SES is another satellite communications play. This is an area of focus for us. We spend a lot of time thinking about it. And where we are today and where we're going over the next few years, you've got SpaceX and their Starlink constellation is really the apex player here. They make up the largest number of satellites and the most connectivity. You have Amazon and their Project Kuiper coming online. They're second. They will be second when they get their constellation up and going in terms of capacity. SES is kind of the only other third company that really matters in my mind. It is they've taken an interesting approach, whereas the other two companies have gone for low Earth orbit constellations. SES has low Earth orbit, medium orbit, and high geostationary orbit satellites, which gives them this really unique mix of assets that provides a capability, to really compete with these other folks in a way that no one else can.
Stock number 9, Trimble.
Well, Trimble is a stock that's had a lot of momentum, and it is also a very well-liked stock among the analysts who cover it. More than 90% recommend it. Let's get the Trimble story.
Trimble is one of the most important, most established companies in the space economy. They are the company in the early 80s. As long as GPS has been around, Trimble has been there. And they built commercial GPS receivers in the 80s that enabled us to tap into these satellites that were built by the government for the government and off limits to anyone else by design. Trimble gave us the ability to access those signals and have access to this really valuable long data, which has now brought on and enabled location-based services, the iPhone 3G, that little blue dot that gets you where you're going. That's all thanks to Trimble.
And stock number 10, Uber.
Okay, well, here's the thing. Uber, a well-liked stock. Analysts say the company's firing on all financial cylinders. They've got an exciting future tied to things like robo-taxis. But space? Uber is a space play? Here's Chad once again.
So this is one of my favorite examples when people are talking about, where can you make money in space? Well, Uber is a great example of that. They are a company that the revenue of the business is powered by GPS. This company would not exist if it was not for those GPS satellites providing that location intelligence. And I think, if you were to go in, it's a fun thought exercise. If you were to go and talk to, a random folks in the cafeteria at Uber on a lunch break, and you said, hey, do you think you work for a space company? I think you'd get a whole bunch of people that say, I don't know what you're talking about. I write code. I work for a rideshare company. But there would be a large contingent, like maybe 40% of the people, that all they do is spend their day thinking about the GPS signal, how it degrades in urban canyons through the concrete and the buildings. And they're losing rides because, that dot on the map is 2 square blocks, right, where they need to get much more precise. So Uber is a really interesting example of a space applications company, the software company that is leveraging orbital infrastructure.
Okay, now before we go, what could be the next hot space play? Well, we mentioned earlier there are a lot of private companies that could be going public at some point soon. Chad shared a preview of some of the potential IPOs to watch.
You have to think that SpaceX made this an investable category a little over a decade ago, right? So we're getting to the point where we're starting to see companies mature and get ready, be in a position to go public, right? And we're starting to see some of that. We've talked about some of those names already. A really interesting one, Firefly, we mentioned. There is Sierra Space, is a spin out of Sierra Nevada Corporation. They do a lot of space and defense work for the U.S. government. They've been talking about potentially filing for an IPO since the middle of last year, so we're keeping an eye on that. Another space capital family company, ICEYE, is reportedly considering an IPO. And Anduril, a space and defense company, yes, it is. Their president and chief strategy officer coming out on LinkedIn and announcing there is on no uncertain terms, Anduril is a space company, and there's talks of them filing for an IPO as well. So, look, SpaceX is the apex player here. I know that everyone is looking at that company and thinking about, will I get a chance to participate in what that company is building? At Space Capital, we think this is the most important company in the world. There's a handful of trillion-dollar market cap companies listed on the U.S. stock exchanges. We think that SpaceX could be one of those, although I don't think that company is planning to go public anytime soon.
All right, our thanks to Chad, and thanks for watching. That's our list of space companies to be watching.
And thank you so much for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next investing video. See you next time.